Welcome to Carefree and Conscious, paranormal and profound authors with stunning true stories. If you like this type of content, be sure to subscribe. I'm your host, Susanne Wilson, the Carefree Medium and Intuition Educator. Today on Carefree and Conscious, free will and your soul's plan, how it works. You do not have to believe in past lives to get a lot out of this interview with Robert Schwartz. Rob is a certified hypnotist specializing in between lives soul regressions to help people heal, resolve life issues, and understand why some of their major challenges happened for their benefit. Learn about your soul's plan, your soul's gift, your soul's love, all titles of Rob's books. Discover how to get the most out of the life you're living now by understanding why you came here and how fortunate you are to be here on the earth at this time in history. And now, Carefree and Conscious, free will, and your soul's plan. This is how it works. Rob Schwartz, welcome to Carefree and Conscious.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
I'm glad you're here. I met you in person at a conference, I think about 10 years ago, if memory serves. And so it's nice to get to follow up again. You've been, it seems like, around the world teaching. And of course, you're teaching online. You have the 3 books out there. A lot of people know a lot about how you got into this. And I want to go into sort of what's in it for the folks that are listening or watching on YouTube, what's in it for them.
Okay.
And so right now, let's get right to the meat. We're in a time of utter chaos throughout the world. I know it seems like every generation thinks that theirs has it the worst or the worst is going on. For me, being a child in the 60s and Vietnam War and conflict in our country, I thought nothing could top that. But what's going on right now, especially in America, is dividing families, having people question, why did I sign up for this? Did I sign up for this? So the first question right out of the gate is, why do we sign up for chaos and difficulty and discovering our limitations? You have this great story I think it's in the first book, Your Soul's Plan. You use the names Tony and Sharon. And the lesson of addiction. Could we start there? Because I think that's really powerful.
We can start there. And this is the passage that I mentioned to you that I wanted to share with people. As you rightly said, we live in very, very chaotic times, and it's causing a lot of anxiety, a lot of depression, confusion, uncertainty, despair. And I wanted to share this passage from my first book, Your Soul's Plan. So it's in the chapter about the pre-birth planning of drug addiction. And just to set the stage, Tony is a soul who chose before coming into body to have a heroin addiction. We won't go now into why he did that, but he had very good reasons. Having put that plan in place, he asked another member of his soul group, Sharon, to be the mother who would lovingly shepherd him through that experience. So in the channeling session, where we research his pre-birth plan, I'm speaking to a collective of angels, and I say to them, quote, I understand that souls can choose to incarnate in any location at any time. Why did Sharon and Tony choose to incarnate in the United States at this time in history? And the angels say, quote, there are many opportunities for them to experience their own limitations, as well as to expand awareness both for themselves and others around them. This is a time for exponential growth in your realm. Many who have chosen to incarnate at this time are finishing the reincarnation cycles and becoming ready to move on to other realms. Then I say, why are there more opportunities to experience limitation now than at other times, either in the past or in the future? And the angels say, quote, the planet is experiencing a systems breakdown. At those points in time when old systems break down, chaos is created. Chaos is a component, a very necessary component of limitation and growth. It is perhaps the most fertile space in which to learn. Let me repeat the last 2 sentences. Chaos is a component, a very necessary component of limitation and growth. It is perhaps the most fertile space in which to learn. So, when we look at the news, we see all of this chaos. We don't like it. We wish it were otherwise, certainly. But here the angels are telling us that this is the most fertile space in which to grow. In two of my books, there's a lot of channeled material from an ascended master named Aaron. And Aaron often says, quote, "You do not come into the incarnation for comfort or convenience." And that is most surely true. And that applies to the chaos. When we're back on the other side and we look back on the growth that came from the experience of chaos, we will be deeply grateful for it.
It's a hard pill for some of us to swallow, to think that we would be grateful for it. But we have about 200 and some years of afterlife research telling us that the souls, when they get to the other side, are proud of how they rose to the challenges. They may Monday morning quarterback themselves a little bit, but no one's judging them, and they're not even judging themselves. They're evaluating what was the growth, what was the learning. So this is powerful stuff to talk about chaos being the component of spiritual growth. Does it have to be that way? Rob, does anybody get to have the so-called perfect life in your findings?
There's an interesting phenomenon that I've come across in researching many, many people's pre-birth plans, which I refer to as a vacation lifetime. There are people who have vacation lifetimes. Now, you might ask the question, well, if chaos is such a wonderful factor for growth, then why would anybody want a vacation lifetime? Well, the soul wants to experience everything. So you might plan a vacation lifetime simply because you've never had one before. But also, I think that people who have these so-called vacation lifetimes, they're teachers, and they're sending a very important message, which is, this is how life can be. In other words, if literally every person were suffering horribly, we would reasonably conclude that life is suffering and that there is nothing else. So those people who are on the so-called vacation lifetime, they're showing us that there is something else, and there's no need to go into despair for that reason.
With the 3 books, can you walk us through why you wrote each one and what you most deeply desire for people to get from each one? Your soul's plan, your soul's gift, your soul's love.
So Your Soul's Plan is the first book in the series. And I should explain here for those who haven't read them. What I did here is they're organized by type of life challenge. So I go through pretty much every major challenge we face here in the Earth School, and in case study format, I explore why somebody planned this very great challenge. The information about pre-birth planning comes from sessions with mediums and channels in all 3 books. In the 3rd book, it also comes from the hypnosis I practice, the Between Lives Soul Regression, in which you can talk to your council of elders and ask what you planned and why. So in the first book, this is focused more on the pre-birth planning of things that are relatively easy to accept that somebody would actually choose. So for example, physical illness. Nobody wants to have a physical illness at the level of the personality, but we can all see, and we probably all know people who have grown from the experience of an illness. Some of the other challenges in Your Soul's Plan, drug addiction, which we just heard a little bit from, mental illness, poverty, blindness, deafness, accidents, and so forth. In Your Soul's Gift, which is the 2nd book in the series, there are some chapters that are much more challenging and sensitive and difficult to accept or wrap a mind around. There's a chapter about the pre-birth planning of suicide, which I will say right away is never planned as a certainty, but it is planned as a possibility. There's a chapter about rape. There's a chapter about incest. And it was not a comfortable position to be in, to put those ideas out into the world, but that was what Spirit was asking me to do. So it's a more challenging book, and it goes deeper into the psychology and the emotions that are involved. The third book is different. Your Soul's Love is about challenges in romantic relationships. So there's a chapter about infidelity, one about being single for a lifetime, celibate relationships, impotence. There's a story about what I call interdimensional parenting, where a couple has had a child, the father passes away and helps the mother from the other side to raise the child, all of which was planned by all of them before they were born. The message I would like people to get, and it would be the same message for all three books, is that your biggest challenges, the most painful things you go through, are not random, arbitrary suffering. They're rich with meaning, they're rich with purpose. Even if you don't know what the meaning and purpose are, if you just come into the awareness that there is always deeper meaning and purpose, that will go a long, long way to alleviating your suffering. And that was one of my intentions in writing these books.
What do you say to people who feel threatened by someone telling them, oh, but you chose this lesson in life, or you planned this, or someone saying, wow, what did you do to attract all these negative things that are happening in your life? What about the propensity that humankind has to judge others and judge themselves, and how does that all play out into the pre-birth planning?
Yeah, pre-birth planning is not a blame the victim mentality. It has nothing to do with that at all. There is no blame in pre-birth planning. It's just an explanation of what is going on in the Earth School. If somebody had that reaction, the first thing I would say is accept it. Don't try to push it away. Don't stuff it down. Don't judge yourself for having the reaction. Validate your own reaction as you would with any reaction that you have to anything. Then, if you're willing and interested, it could be worthwhile to spend some time contemplating the question, why does this idea of pre-birth planning trigger fear in me? Or why does it irritate me or upset me? I think that could be a very rich exploration. And most likely what you will find at the bottom of that exploration is the ego. The ego does not like the idea of pre-birth planning. And this is rich ground for coming into a deeper understanding of how the ego operates.
It sure is, because at essence, we are viewing the world through what about me, through our lenses, right?
That's right.
So if somebody out there is just hearing about pre-birth planning for the first time, and I know they must be out there, what is the first thing that you would want that person to know about themselves as a soul and about the choices that they make before they come? What would be the first thing that you would tell a person to introduce them to the concept?
The first thing I would say, you might know my first book, Your Soul's Plan, was originally titled Courageous Souls when it was self-published. That's the first thing. It takes tremendous, tremendous courage to plan a life on Earth, which, as I understand it, is literally the most difficult school in our universe. And it takes even more courage to execute the pre-birth plan once you get here. So my message to people is always honor and respect yourself for being an extraordinarily courageous being, and honor and respect literally everybody else, even the people you just can't stand for whatever reason, because they have that same courage. You know, there are many beings who know there would be great value in incarnating on Earth, and not all of them have the courage to do it. Many do not have the courage to do it. That's first and foremost. Then I would say, you're probably not who you currently think you are. And what I mean by that is most people are heavily, if not completely, identified with their thoughts, their feelings, and their bodies. That's not who you are. Those are things you have, things you carry through a lifetime, but it's not who you really are. You know, if you have a horse, it doesn't mean that you are a horse. You just have a horse. Well, you have thoughts, you have emotions, you have a body, but that's not who you are. They're things you carry through an incarnation. So who are you? You are this vast, infinite, limitless, multidimensional being of unconditional love. God is love. God creates only with love, and God creates only love from love. So you are made from love, and you are literally the energy of unconditional love placed into the confines of your human body. If you don't know that that's who you are, that's the value of going on a spiritual path. That's the value of meditation. That's the value of introspection. That's how you discover that you are this vast being of love that I just described.
What does Aaron have to say about free will and malleability of plans?
I'm not going to speak specifically about Aaron here, who's one of the channeled master in my books. But what Spirit in general has told me is that if you think of, so let's say that you have a stack of sheets of paper in front of you. And in this stack, each individual sheet is a complete set of pre-birth plans. So in this metaphor, every person has their own stack of sheets of paper. The sheets vary according to vibration. The ones at the top are the highest vibrational pre-birth plans. That's where most of the learning is done through love, peace, and joy, not so much through pain and suffering. Sheets at the bottom are the opposite. That's where the learning is done through pain and suffering, not so much through love, peace, and joy. Which sheet you are on in any given moment depends upon your vibration, your frequency. The average person is bouncing up and down in vibration all day long. So as you do that, you move up to plans that are much more enjoyable, and you move down to plans that are much less enjoyable. But the point is, you can move up and down depending upon your vibration. So everybody wants a life of love, peace, and joy. How do you do that? Well, you keep your vibration as high as possible. How do you do that? Well, there are a lot of ways. The most simple, although not necessarily the easiest, is to, anytime you have to make a decision, ask the question, what would love with a capital L do now? Whatever that answer is, do that. If you do that consistently over a long enough period of time, you're moving up, up, up in your stack of sheets of paper, and you'll have the life that you would like to have.
Yeah, my reaction is because when I end a seminar or one of my satsangs, I always say sending you love with a capital L. I make a capital L with my hand, and once in a while I explain that's not small L like how I love pizza, but the capital L is literally sending love from my heart space to yours. And then those I'm sending it to, in my mind, I'm sending it with you're free to accept or reject this love energy. It simply is, but it's kind of been I don't know where I don't know where it came from. It's kind of been a tagline, and I got these chills when you said that, because that's actually the answer to everything. And it's not that we're sitting here going, oh, it's all love and light. You're very clear about the fact that there is suffering and challenge and limitation here on earth, but you're also equally clear about how it's for our greater good.
Right.
Okay, so what do we do with knowing that, and then having an issue rise up in our day where we get bad news, we have cancer or a loved one has cancer? What is the shift in thinking? What does this knowledge offer us when we face a challenge?
Well, if you're getting news that you or a loved one have cancer, the first reaction is going to be intense emotions, probably principally fear. So you don't want to engage in a spiritual bypass and immediately go to, oh, I must have planned this, therefore I shouldn't be feeling fear. That's going to be very counterproductive. If you stuff the fear back down like that, it goes into the cells of the body where it creates illness. And if you just got news that you have cancer, you've got enough illness to deal with as it is. You don't need more from fear being pushed back into the body. So feel your feelings, feel them fully, feel them deeply, feel them whenever they come up. When you're ready, then you can ask the question, if I planned this cancer before I was born, why might I have done that? And the wording of that question is very important, because when you phrase it that way, it doesn't actually require a belief in pre-birth planning. You're just saying, if I planned it, why might I have done that? So you can get at the underlying meaning and purpose without actually believing in pre-birth planning. Now, a lot of mental answers are going to come. Maybe some of them will be accurate, maybe some of them won't. Entertain them, but look for the feeling response too. Or when a mental answer comes, what does it feel like in the body? The body is, you could call it a truthometer. It's going to tell you when something is true and when something is false. If you get a feeling of, yes, that's correct, that thought from the body, then trust that. If the body sort of tenses or contracts when you think about something, then the body is saying no. You can really rely on your body to tell you the truth.
That's for sure. My whole mission in life is to teach people how to tune in for themselves so they don't have to keep going and getting readings and build that trust. And speaking of trust, do you think it's fair to say that once we realize that we're at essence, we're always okay because we're always going to go back to source, that we can trust that things will work out? Or do we have to be careful, I guess, that we're not becoming Pollyannas?
You can trust that everything is going to work out because it actually does. But belief is a very powerful force. So even though we live in a benign and infinitely loving universe, if your current belief is that we don't, and that you actually can't trust, or that you shouldn't trust, then you will experience the outpicturing of that belief. So, there's a saying you sometimes hear in New Age circles, you'll see it when you believe it, which is the opposite of what we generally believe to be true. But that saying is true. So if you believe that the universe is fundamentally flawed or unsafe in some way, you're going to experience that. And you've got to work at the level of the belief. That's where faith comes in. It's a leap in faith.
What's the difference between believing and knowing?
A belief is really a concept, and concepts are very limited for the most part and limiting. The human brain, which we have really in Western society put on a pedestal, doesn't deserve, in my opinion, the sort of reverence we've given it to. We have placed the brain and rational, logical, linear thought above the heart, above feeling, and we've made it king, and we allow it to direct our lives. And something that I come to see more and more deeply as I go down my own spiritual path, the human brain is really very, very limited in its understanding of reality. It's limited in its understanding of the physical world, and the physical world is very, very different in most ways than the non-physical world. So it really is limited in terms of its understanding of the non-physical. Yeah, so knowing is something you can feel in the body. It's something you can feel in your gut. It's something that you know in your heart. You feel it. It's a felt knowing. It's not a thought. It's not a belief. It's not a concept. Let me put it this way. Probably everybody who will hear this conversation has had both of the following experiences. One is in which you're talking to somebody who has total credibility. They're saying something that is very believable, and yet you know that they're lying to you. How do you know? The second scenario is the opposite of that. You're talking to somebody who has no credibility at all. What they're telling you seems ridiculous, preposterous on the surface, and yet you know they're telling you the truth. How do you know? In both cases, your knowing defies logic, but you know, and you know that you know. That's knowing.
Oh, this is good. This is good. I'm going to make a prediction right now that people are going to be hitting the rewind. You do that again. This is good. Can you take us into why, what drew you to the LB, the life between lives regression?
What happened is, when Your Soul's Plan came out, which I believe was in 2007, very quickly I started getting emails from people around the world, all of whom were saying the same thing. They said, I would like you to tell me what my pre-birth plan is. And for many years, I wrote back and I said exactly the same thing to each person who said that. I said, I'm not a medium, I'm not a channel. I don't know what your pre-birth plan is. If you want to know that, work with one of the mediums in the book. But then I learned about the work of Michael Newton, who founded the field of life between lives, LBL regression. I call it a between lives soul regression, but it's the same thing. And I took that training, and this gave me a way to facilitate a process in which the client could access their pre-birth plan on their own. And as you just said, they don't have to go to a medium or a channel and have somebody else tell you something. You can find out directly on your own.
You talk about divine virtues. Could you explain?
So when I researched people's pre-birth plans for the 3 books, one of the things that I had the amazing opportunity to do was to go into people's pre-birth planning sessions and actually hear the conversations they had with the other souls when they were planning their lives, including planning their biggest challenges. Well, when they were planning big challenges, a lot of the conversation revolved around a desire to cultivate and then express, while in body, certain qualities that are very important to the soul. And I gave those qualities the name divine virtues. Over a period of time, I put together a list of the ones that came up the most often. I think there are now 28 on the list. And by the way, if anybody wants the list, I'm happy to send that out. Just go to yoursoulsplan.com, send me a message in the contact form and ask for the list of divine virtues. But the idea here is that from a pre-birth perspective, the challenge that you are planning provides both the opportunity and the motivation to cultivate the virtue. And the virtue raises the vibration of the soul. So let's take a common example. Many people have a pre-birth intention to cultivate or deepen in compassion in this lifetime. If that's your pre-birth intention, there's a pretty good chance that you will plan to incarnate in a nuclear family that will treat you with a profound lack of compassion. Again, the absence of compassion in the external environment is intended to drive you within, where hopefully, over time, you will cultivate self-compassion. And then the second half of the life plan is always to take the virtue, in this case, compassion that you've cultivated for self, and turn it outward in some form of service to others. So it's both cultivate and express. Both are equally important to the soul.
Are there just a couple of things that someone could do right now to live more towards their soul's plan?
Yes. Again, ask yourself anytime you have to make a decision, what would love with a capital L do now? Another thing you can do anytime you have to make a decision, look for feelings of either excitement or joy. Excitement or joy are communications direct from your soul saying, yes, this is the way for you. Another thing to look for, and it sounds so simple, it's almost deceptively easy, is interest. You know, we could ask the question, where does interest come from? When I was working on my first book, I found it challenging to decide which stories to put in the book. And I was having a personal channeling session with Jesus, and I asked him, how do I make that decision? And he said, go with the ones that most interest you. That's soul level guidance that's coming in the form of interest. Another thing to look for is what I call time distortion, or as some people call it, the flow state. So probably for everybody, there's at least one activity that when you do it, it will seem to you like only 10 minutes have gone by, but then when you look at the clock, it'll be 2 hours later. Any activity that causes that kind of time distortion for you, there's something there that's part of your pre-birth plan. And the last thing I'll say is meditate. This is the best way to get guidance on any question, not just what is your pre-birth plan. Just speak aloud to your soul and your guides before you start to meditate. Pose one question and then just see what comes to you. And it's not so much that you will get some brilliant idea during meditation, although you might. It's not so much that you will hear your guides talk to you in meditation, although you might. It's more common, from what I see, that a seed gets planted. And then days, weeks, or months down the road, the seed germinates. And all of a sudden, the person has this brilliant inspiration. They think it's their own idea, but really the seed was planted some time back in a meditation. They just don't have any way of identifying that.
Oh, these are such good tips. And I love what you said about the seed being planted, because so often in my classes, I hear people say, I meditated, every week for 2 months and I didn't get any answers. And then they tell me about something new they're doing, or something that's changed or improved. And I'm thinking, man, that's part of the answer right there. It's like we want to get to the end result so fast, but we really don't have control over the timing of things. It seems we just have control over what you're saying, how, we don't bypass any of our emotions. We sit with them, we learn from them, we question, what am I learning from this experience? We question, wow, this whole day went by so fast and I was, for example, painting or playing my guitar or whatever. These are things I need to do more. It's like you're giving us really concrete, down to earth stuff, and it's coming from a, a sort of method that a lot of people are just not ready for. I mean, people hear this knowledge is coming from channeling, and I get it all the time. Like, how do we trust this stuff? I always say the proof is in the eating of the pudding. What is the proof to you?
Well, the proof to me is, does it make me a happier person, a more peaceful person, a more loving person, a more joyful person? Do I feel in greater harmony with life, with the universe, with other people? Those are really the things to look for.
That's awesome. Right before we started, I don't really chat before we start because I don't want to miss anything when we hit the record button. But I was asking you about your world travels and your teaching, and does your soul's plan, does this information translate easily to other cultures? And I spent a lot of time in Spain and Mexico, and you said something very interesting about these cultures. Could you share that?
Well, I said that my work has been well received in Spanish-speaking countries. And I'm not entirely sure what the reason is for that, but I think that part of it is that although there is an analytic and intellectual component to my books and to what I talk about, it's very heart-based, or at least I would like to believe that it's very heart-based. And I think some of the Spanish-speaking countries, there's been less emphasis on rational thought and intellect than we have here in the West, and more of a focus on the heart. And so I think there's a certain resonance there at the level of the heart. This is not intended in any way as a knock against any other country or culture. It's just something that I observe, as I travel.
I've observed the exact same thing, and that there is also an openness that ancestors, their souls are still there and they're helping us. There is also an emphasis on ritual many times, and then the ritual gets extrapolated to include a prayer and meditation practice daily. So there might be some things that other cultures can learn about, a more spiritual nature to our day to day. And I got to tell you, after the last 4 months of barely being in the United States and coming back, it only took me a few days to just feel intensely stressed in America. And I adore this country. I love this country. I would probably get some hate from saying that, we'll go back there and live or whatever. Hopefully not. I don't attract too many folks like that. All I'm saying is we're forgetting, sometimes in some places more than others, depending on what's happening, we're forgetting that we're spiritual beings and we need that nurturing, and we can give it to ourselves, whether it's from our community or from being in nature. So do we plan as part of the pre-birth inventory that there's going to be something that resonates more with us spiritually than others? Like, I know people that they've got to get to the ocean, or they've got to hike, or they need that hour every day that nourishes them. Is that identified before we come to?
I would imagine it is. My books are very much focused on the pre-birth planning of major life challenges. So that particular question is not something that I have really spent time exploring. But when I do the between life soul regressions, that we start with an abbreviated past life regression. So I've seen many, many past life experiences the clients have had. And very often, something that they develop an affinity for in multiple past lives, that's going to get carried forward energetically into the current lifetime. There's just a resonance with whatever it is, the mountains, the ocean, whatever it might be. Everybody seems to have their tonic, so to speak. And I think a lot of that is based on good experiences with the tonic in past lives.
In a little bit of heaven to earth, bringing a little bit of that here. When I say heaven, people might think Valhalla, Summerland, Return to Source, or whatever. My experience has been that we don't just become floating balls of consciousness or light, just bouncing around, that we actually have a real life when we return to Source. And you're giving us a lot of evidence of that too. Why would we plan, and why would we evaluate where we are in our progression of souls if we weren't living a real life when we're not in these physical bodies? What do you most want to be remembered for with your work? What is the main thing that 30 years from now, when you're going to be more than a footnote in history? You've given a great contribution here.
Thank you.
How do you want to be remembered for your work?
I would like to be remembered as somebody who made a contribution to what we could call the Great Awakening. So clearly there is a worldwide awakening going on, where people are starting to realize, as we were discussing earlier, I'm not my thoughts, I'm not my emotions, I'm not the body. I'm this soul who has a body temporarily. And I'm this vast, multidimensional, infinitely loving being. I would like to be remembered as somebody who helped people come into that kind of remembrance.
I know that you're going to have that desire fulfilled. So how do people work with you? They definitely need to read the books. I need to read your Soul's Love. Is that the name of the third book? Your Soul's
That's the third book. Yeah.
Okay. I definitely, sign me up. I need to do that. How do people work with you aside from reading the books, and any final thought that you'd like to leave us with? You've been very generous today.
Well, you can do the Between Life Soul Regression either in an online group workshop or in a private session. It works just as well either way. We do it as a group workshop like every 2 or 3 months, and you can find out the dates on the events page at yoursoulsplan.com. If you prefer a private session, then go to the sessions page at yoursoulsplan.com. There's actually a 1-hour video of a private session on that page, so people can see exactly what it consists of. Another thing I'd like to mention, we have my wife and I have a monthly mentorship and membership program called Rise to the Path. And if you click on resources in the main menu, it will be under that. That is really a community of very open-hearted, loving, deeply caring people who just nurture and support each other through whatever is going on in their lives. So if you're looking for community, please consider joining us. I think the thought that I would like to leave people with, it's been shared with me that during this time of the ascension is such a desirable experience for the soul that there were approximately 3 times as many souls who wanted to incarnate now as available bodies. So in order to be here for the ascension, you had to make more or less a 1 in 3 cut. And the way people were chosen for that is that you had to have something to offer the ascension process. So there are so many people in the world who feel small, weak, powerless, helpless, insignificant, and actually nothing could be further from the truth. You were chosen, you made this 1 in 3 cut, and you were selected because you have something in particular to offer humanity and Gaia during this ascension process. So maybe you know what that is, maybe you don't. And if you don't, it's worth spending some time considering what that might be. But just know that you were chosen to be here. It's a great honor, a great privilege to be here for the ascension. And your presence here is essential. Even if you aren't actually doing something in terms of physical action in the world, your vibration is your major contribution. This is true for even people who have active missions in the world. Your vibration is always your biggest contribution to the world. And your vibration is essential. That's why you were chosen to be here now.
Your vibration is essential. That's why you were chosen to be here. Every person is unique and special. Lots of golden gems. Thank you so much, Rob Schwartz. Thank you.
You're welcome. My pleasure.
Visit our website, carefreemedium.com, or find us on social media at Carefree Medium. Thanks for supporting Carefree and Conscious.